right, ladies, we're going to get right into it. I met Boniwe this year. Was it this year or last year?
It was last year.
Last year already, and we did a YouTube video on all things
HR.
I was astounded by her knowledge, right? And if you are in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, this is the person you want to talk to, listen to, and hear from, okay?
Thank you.
So what are some of the things or the misconceptions that people have when they get into, the doorstep? Let's say it's your first time at corporate. What are the misconceptions we carry when we go into the workplace?
I think there's a lot, but I'll just touch on a few. The first one is believing that your hard work will get you ahead, right? People often say, work hard and you'll get promoted, right?
And some even say your work will
All, you need to make sure you understand and you know who are the relevant stakeholders or the decision makers that are going to contribute to that decision. So it doesn't really rely on your work alone. But even if there's a promotion opportunity and your manager says, I want to promote Boniwe or I want to promote Mabalo, they will want to get input from other stakeholders that you are servicing or engaging with in the organization. And if you hadn't made it an effort for yourself to know who those decision makers are, to actually build a relationship with them and making sure that they understand your work and what you are capable of, your chances of getting ahead become very limited. And hence I say hard work alone is not enough. So it's important for you to advocate for your work, to know who the relevant decision makers are, to make sure that you associate or you build a circle of trust. We talk about, board of directors, but who's your sounding board, right? Who are the people that you need to engage with? Who are the people that you know that their feedback is valuable? And that is going to help you to get ahead. So never believe that your work alone or putting your head down, is going to get you ahead. There's a lot of work that you need to do, and you must always remember that.
But now, what if my direct manager is a very toxic person? The person who's supposed to advocate for me and the work that I do. What if that person, every time I think about work, I stress?
Yeah, definitely sure. So a lot of us have encountered toxic managers, right? But even with those toxic managers, there are stakeholders that you hold good relations with, right? So make sure that you maintain the good relationships that you can get out of corporate. What that means is that also making your work visible to the right people, own your work. If someone is talking about a project that you worked on and that saved the company 5 million or it brought around efficiencies, when somebody talks about that in the corridor and say, oh yes, I was leading that job, so that they know, because if you keep quiet, they will assume that your manager actually did the job. Or your manager can actually take the job and say, so-and-so did it because they have favorites in their team. So if there's an opportunity or you find yourself in a situation whereby you can talk about a contribution that you have made, own that contribution, it's yours, right? And if you are invited, into certain meetings at work, make it a point that you observe the meeting and also give your contribution so that they can see where the origin of the work is coming from. Oftentimes we hope and wish and believe that people have our best interests at heart, but people have their own interests at heart, and sometimes it's unfortunate that it is at your expense, right? You will always be surprised. Why is Mapalo getting promoted every second year? Why is she getting a pay progression? It's purely because she's someone else's favorite, or she can talk. Sometimes she can talk about her work. It's her, she talks about her work, she owns it up, she makes sure it's visible, to the right people, And when comes performance review conversations, Mapalo has actually a list, of what she has achieved, and she shares that to be able, to counter against any bad rating. Mapalo will bring the feedback that she has received from stakeholders, those emails whereby they are congratulating you, they are sending you a voucher, All of those things, they are very important for you to keep record of, so that you'll be able to use them at a certain point in time. Even when your manager says you are a poor performer, you can ask, how does a poor performer get this recognition from the CEO? How does a poor performer save money? How does a poor performer bring in efficiency? So you need to make sure that you are always get up to have conversations about you and your work. And you can't go into conversations whereby you are just a passive participant and you're listening to someone giving you feedback that's negative, giving you a rating that's not good enough, and then you leave the room disgruntled and don't do anything. You need to fight for, for your recognition and for what you rightfully deserve. So we mustn't believe that we need to keep quiet and miraculously, God will promote us. You need to actively work, around that.
Yeah, and I think also there's a sense of how we grow up, right?
Sure.
The way especially Black people grow up is, if you do not ask too many questions, that's a sign of respect. If you don't, assert yourself, that's a sign of respect. And I've
Sure.
seen that in corporate, the exact opposite works.
Yes. And I actually also saw that when I worked in management consulting, right? You always need to advocate for your work. Your manager will also give you feedback after a meeting to say, oh, we had visitors from Spain today, but you didn't ask a question. Because asking a question in a meeting or having a contribution in a meeting carries weight, right? However, in our African culture, we are brought up to be very modest, very respectful. When the CEO walks down the corridor, you need to step aside and look down. When you get into the lift with them, you just greet and you look away, right? Unfortunately, corporate doesn't work like that. And some of the things, we actually need to put them as part of our development plans so that we can grow those skills that are needed for you to advance in corporate. Yes, culturally it's good, but if you are working for an American company, they don't need you to be, humble and looking down. They need you to have a direct eye contact because it has a meaning. They need you to have a firm handshake because it says something about your confidence. And yes, some of the things, they don't come naturally at us, but if there are the things that are important in your workspace, you need to make an intentional effort to work, on those things so that you can actually get to develop. Because we have seen where people get ahead purely because they can hold a conversation with the MD, purely because, they also read a certain, business magazine, and, they can talk about, or maybe I read Financial Mail and this is what they said about grey listing,
What do you think about it?
What do you think about it? Or these are my views, right?
Yes.
So we don't like doing those. We don't like doing those things because of our upbringing, right? So there are certain things from our past and for our upbringing we actually need to start unlearning.
Yeah.
It might not be a comfortable journey or an easy journey, but you need to make effort, especially if you feel that, I want to be in corporate, I want to get ahead. So you need to actually start understanding the dynamics of the environment, the politics in the environment. Someone once said that you can always say that I don't do politics, but do politics will do you. That's how, and that's it, right? But we're not saying that you need to actually be, be ruthless and all of those things, but actually get to understand the dynamics, get to understand who's who in the zoo, get to understand which door you need to knock on for you to be able to be recognized. So just don't sit back and hope, right? So learn everything that is important in the space that you're in. If it means that they carry, you belonging to a certain professional body is important, pay that professional body fee annually, right? And then attend those webinars, make yourself visible because you know that in the profession that you have chosen, that professional body carries weight. Your visibility and your participation carries weight. So hence I say, understand the lay of the land and try to see how you actually get to navigate it for your success.
All right. Let's talk about salary negotiations, right?
Yeah.
Studies show that women leave a lot of money on the table.
Yes.
I remember even with myself when I started Women in Finance, when I would get potential clients, I'd be afraid to say, this is my fee. I would always try to think, oh, is this high? Is this too low? How do women negotiate well to get the salary that they actually deserve?
Sure. I like the fact that you mentioned that studies show that, because studies do show that 70% of men, they will always negotiate the salary, right? We as women, again, to to the culture thing, we are very modest. You need to be grateful that somebody gave you an opportunity, right? But you also need to remember that you've got the capabilities and the know-how of the job. So they chose you because you are capable and you deserve to be there. So what men do is that you give them an offer. Chances are they only met 60% or 50% of the requirements, while you are, meet 80 or 100% of the requirements, right? So men will confidently walk into the room or confidently write that email and request for more. So when you get an offer, right, 85% of the time when an offer is given to you, chances are that is not what is ideally budgeted, right? They leave room for negotiation. But as women, most of the time, we don't use that negotiation room. So you need to go back and say, thank you, Mr. So-and-so. I have received my offer, and I'm looking forward to the prospect of joining your organization. After reviewing this, I would actually like us to enter into a negotiation process around this offer. And below here with my reasons. I've been in the industry for 15 years, working for multinational companies. I have actually worked for company X where I have actually saved so much money. I have implemented this particular system that has won me an award or an international award. And I believe that me joining your company will be more valuable and I'll be able to share my expertise to grow from where you are. You know that you can, right? But we don't because we're thinking that we need to be grateful, or we don't want to create animosity or think that, when I step into that space, they are going to think that the person is grateful or you're just here for money. And yes, you are there for money because you are, right?
Yes,
You are there for money because you've got something to offer, right? And you are actually not working, pro bono or for an NGO. You know what I mean? So it's important to be able to state the reasons that would make you want to negotiate your offer, especially if it's an offer that you believe it's below what you deserve. The last thing is that do your research in terms of what the market pays. Information around salaries is not freely available in South Africa as a developing country. However, if you look at REM Channel, you can just Google REM Channel. They actually give benchmarks around salaries in different industries and in different professions, right? And it's you can trust that because I think it's done by Old Mutual. You can go to Glassdoor, you can go to Career 24, It might not give you the exact amount, but it gives you an estimate of some sort. And if you have friends in HR that work in remuneration or total rewards, you can ask them if they have such information that they can share with you. You can even ask your colleagues or your friends that are in the same space and say, what do you think would be an ideal salary for this particular level or this particular position? Yes, they don't have to disclose their own earnings, but they can give you an estimate and then take that information, to actually go into that negotiation and to say, I do understand this is what the industry and the market is currently, paying. This is the latest feedback from the REM channel, which was released in Q2 of 2023, so that they can see that you know what you're doing and you're not just taking chances. And that's what our male counterparts do all the time. They do it without even doing the research that we have to do. So make sure that when you get an offer, especially if it's an offer that you believe it's below what you deserve, but if you get an offer and it's maybe they gave you 45% and you were aiming for 30, then it's good, right? You don't necessarily have to go and negotiate everything, especially if you've received what you want. But make sure that you always negotiate where there's an opportunity, because companies are always looking at saving money. And if you are earning 20,000 now, and the position is 60,000, they give you 40, you are happy, right? It's 100% jump. You have no reason to question, you go sign, but you're still underpaid based on what the market is offering. So hence it's important for us to be alert and to be aware in terms of what is happening around the remuneration in the industries that we are in.
So around negotiation of salary, what if the recruiter says, okay, you want to negotiate, but how much were you earning currently? So normally they want the pay slip.
Yes.
Why would you want my pay slip?
The pay slip conversation is very, the pay slip conversation is a very sensitive one. First of all, for recruiters and employers asking for pay slip, it's not legislated. That much I can give you. It doesn't fall under any of the labor legislations that we have to say you need to provide that. However, it's a practice that has been normalized over centuries, right? And especially in developing countries. So they want it because they actually want to pay you in line with where you were. if you were earning whatever, they just want to give you a 10% or a 15% of that. They don't want to give you what you actually deserve or what the market is paying, right? But with recruiters, it could be different because recruiters are paid on commission. So if they negotiate a higher salary for you, then they get a higher commission, right?
Okay.
But it's not always the case. And with employers, for me, normally they will come back and say, we want to make sure that you're not underpaid. But I can say, no, this is what I'm willing to negotiate around, right? Instead of me having to issue your pay slip. So you need to be careful to see if you are comfortable to or you are not comfortable to. And if you are not comfortable, you can just say, I'm not comfortable to share my payslip because it's a confidential document between myself and my employer, and it does have personal information which by law I am not allowed to share without the other party's consent, and which is true because basically that's what you would find in the Poppy Act, right?
But I know that's, on paper it's there.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for a job. I want to leave my current company
Yes.
so badly. How do I say no to someone who could potentially be my new employer?
Right, and that's what I said earlier. You also need to weigh, your options, right? So if you want to leave and you're desperate to leave, right? And the only thing that's standing between you and leaving your toxic work environment is sharing your payslip, then share your payslip because, there are more benefits to you sharing the payslip than withholding it back, right? And employers shouldn't really disqualify you for refusing to share your payslip. However, we have seen instances whereby somebody refuses and then they are actually disqualified from the process. They'll come back with feedback that we find a suitable person or we're actually still looking, but the main reason is you having to refuse. So you need to weigh your options in terms of your circumstances because circumstances are not the same, right? But if you're looking for an opportunity and you're still happy, or probably you're being headhunted, right? Even when you're headhunted, it's much better because they came looking for you. You're like, no, I was happy, I didn't apply, and this is what I'm willing to, to move for. Or tell me how much you're offering, or I am willing to start negotiating from the base off, right? And if you're offering anything less, then let's not continue the conversation. But it is important to weigh your options, right? But if you really want to leave and you are very desperate, then you might want to actually share the payslip. Or if maybe you are at home and you've been retrenched, in the past 2 years and you haven't found something, and they actually want your 2021 or 2020 payslip, which I believe is irrelevant, and that is the only thing standing in your way, then please feel free to share your payslip. But like I said, it's not legislated.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about now you are employed in the company and you've been working for a year, 2 years, or how many ever years for that
Sure.
matter.
Successfully, and it has been implemented, and you feel that you've worked so hard and you need to be recognized for it, it's a good opportunity for you to open that conversation with your line manager, and you have all the evidence to support your conversation. Secondly, it could be during an annual or a media review process at work, and where you say to your manager, this is what I have achieved, this is what I'm doing, and therefore I would like us to review, my salary. Or I've done my research, in the market, and I understand this role pays this much, and with the qualifications that I have, the experience that I have, I came in not understanding, where I was, but now I actually do, and my performance, is supporting the request. Because it's very important to also make sure that when you go and have that conversation, your performance is in par with the request, right? Because if it's not, they will tell you that we cannot be, compensating for poor performance or giving people money that are not actually performing. So you need to make sure that your performance is good and you actually bring in, the relevant evidence to the conversation. Like I said, it's a project. It could be maybe sometimes you've even received a new qualification, recently, or they've extended the scope of your work, or the complexity, of your work has expanded. So those are the things that you actually bring into the conversation. Make sure there's metrics to it, to support your conversation. Because if you're coming and say the petrol price is high,
Inflation.
and inflation, Lesetja Kganyago said, it affects everybody in the company, so you're not the only one. And that's why it's much better and easier to have that conversation around your merit at work. And if they say, because sometimes, and you also need to be very mature about it and strategic about it, when is the right time, how is the company financially performing? Because if they're not performing well, what are the chances that they're going to say, they're going to say yes? And if your line manager say, no, I can't, or not now, you need to ask when, so that you can make a note of when to pick up the conversation again. If your line manager say, I'm not the decision maker, then you ask, who is the decision maker? Do I have the conversation with the decision maker, or you will have that conversation with the decision maker on my behalf and give me feedback? And can you provide me with timelines? Because if we don't have timelines, then the person might never come back to you, or they might not prioritize you.
All right. I absolutely love that answer. But I wanted to go to the floor, get some questions.
Sure.
There's one already. Okay.
Oh, that was quick.
Hi again.
Hi.
So I wanted to talk about the boys' club,
Yes.
at work. I come from a very toxic work environment. I actually left it to start a business. That's how deep it was. So, CEO, head of operations, the manager that manages the team leaders, and then the team leaders. They were all a scheme. And if one team leader makes a sexual advance on you and you tell somebody, you're in trouble, not him, because they're a team.
Sure.
How do you work around that? Because I went as far as complaining to ethics.
At work?
And ethics comes back and tells the CEO.
To say this
The CEO comes back and has a meeting and says, you can speak up now. How? You know what I mean? The reason why I went privately is because I can't speak up. So how do you work around sexual harassment in the boys' club?
Sure. Right? Yeah, so if the internal processes does not support you, because there will always be an internal process, right? Either a grievance process or how to lodge a complaint. And even if it's not documented, we would go with what the labor legislation or the LRA is actually guiding us to do, Report it to someone, ideally report it in writing. And if someone doesn't do anything, then report it to their super senior, right? If they don't do anything, you actually then go to the third person who's senior than them. And just make sure, for me, my advice is just make sure that you keep all these complaints in writing so that it's not your word against them. And then, of course, in a boys' club, because they're protecting each other, nothing will happen. Then you can actually go to the CCMA and file for, unfair labor practice, right? And then the CCMA will actually, intervene. Remember, you don't only go to the CCMA because you've been dismissed, right? You go to the CCMA because there is a dispute at work, there aren't any internal processes. You don't have to wait for you to be dismissed. The CCMA is there to mediate every day, all day for your issues, right? Then that's when you can actually do that. And then the CCMA will be able to, to intervene in that particular instance, and they will get to hold the organization, accountable, and also for failure to address it. And you would know, I think last year in March, the Minister of Employment and Labor released a code of good practice on the elimination and prevention of harassment in the workplace. And one of the things that he says there is that companies that fail, to address such matters, whether it's like sexual harassment or bullying, legal action can be taken against them. But unfortunately, we're also not as confident to do that as ordinary employees. We don't know where to start and we don't know where to go. And often we fear victimization, and sometimes you want to save your job because maybe you are the only, breadwinner. But unfortunately, sometimes we just need to find the courage inside of us, to actually fight the system. And you might fight it not for you, but you might be fighting it for others in the organization or others that are actually going to come. So I always say to people, if nothing happens internally, go to the CCMA, and they will actually be able to guide you in terms of what you need to do, or they'll actually get to intervene.
So just as a follow-up question to hers, sure. If she has left the employer, does she have some sort of remedy to say, you know what, I was treated badly here, even after she has left?
Sure. So, it's very tricky, because then in that sense, she might be saying, I actually left my employ because, it was unbearable for me to continue working there. That's why I left. And that's why I was saying to her, it is important for you to actually lodge these complaints in writing, as part of your evidence to go claim constructive dismissal. Because with constructive dismissal, the one that alleges bears the onus of having to prove, right? And if you don't have anything to show that you did follow an internal process, it becomes very difficult for the commissioner to do anything, because then the CEO or whoever will say, oh, but we've got a grievance process. Why didn't you raise a grievance, right? Why didn't you tell us we could have done something? So now it seems as if it's your fault, right? While they know very well that they didn't do anything. And hence I'm saying it's always important to do these things in writing, so that when you decide to say, I'm actually taking this on, you have it in black and white. They don't even have to respond if they don't want to respond, but just have the evidence yourself that you have actually, raised the issue and they have failed in their responsibilities as an employer to do anything about it. And that also goes for workplace bullying cases as well. Keep a diary. On this day, Melissa said to me, on this particular day, she treated me like this, she shouted at me, and also note who were the bystanders, right? What meeting was happening, what day was it, and all of those things. So it is important for you to keep that record, because it helps you to actually build up a case so that it can actually carry a bit of weight. But if it's your weight against them, then it becomes very difficult. So to your point, the commissioner will say, okay, they said they had internal process, you didn't follow the internal processes, so there's nothing that they can do. So it's important to keep record of anything that you feel it might be harassment related, bullying related, so that we can be able to then help you in terms of navigating the support that you need for that matter.
100%. I saw a hand here and over there.
As an HR person, what are your views on job hopping? Because I'll tell you, I think I have a strategy now of getting an increase. Because when you are in the same role, for example, I work in a bad structure, it's just a bad structure. There's no role that I can sort of be promoted to. So my strategy is that I'll spend like 2 years in a company, 2 years in a company, and thereafter I move, I look for another job, because I know that when I come in, I have more room to negotiate, and I negotiate the first offer that they give me.
Sure.
But once you're in the role, then they'll give you like 4% increase. The company's not doing well and all of that. But how does it look to you as an HR person when someone job hops after 2 years or whatever?
Sure. So you will mostly find that challenge in traditional companies, or because they, especially a traditional company where it's mostly you have your your baby boomers and all of those things, because they value tenure, and benefits and all of those things. But with the millennials and the Gen Zs, right, they move very regularly, because if you find yourself in a space whereby you're not happy, why stay, right? Because you don't want to be identified as a job hopper. But to your point, for me, I often say to people, that is the fastest way to get a high salary or to get your salary moving. And I'm not saying move every year now, in a corner, I normally say anything between 2 and 3 years is good for you to move, so that you've got a solid, track record in a company. Maybe you have 1 or 2, performance ratings, and then you can get to move. That's why sometimes you find people come in organizations at high salaries, and I complain that my salary is low, but so-and-so is new, but they're earning 40% above me. But you'd find that I have been in that company for 10 years, and I've been subjected to inflationary increases year in and year out. And during financial years where they are not performing well, they might say, we don't have increases this year at all, and just probably give you a bonus so that they don't have to increase their their payroll, cost. So having to move, it actually helps you to get your salary ideally where you want to, especially if you feel that you were not, treated well or given the right offers in the beginning, because that's where it starts, right? Because remember, whatever entry position you get with the salary, that's going to set the tone for your career going forward. But if you know that you were not given a fair offer, there's no reason that's holding you back, because when you move, you will either move for a 15%, 25%, certain instances, 45%. Then it actually helps you to quickly, match up to what the market is paying, and so that you are not undervalued. Because sometimes if you're also earning more than what the market offers, you are also sometimes also not attractive, to the market. So it's a catch-22 situation, because I'll be an HR business partner, maybe let's say earning like 40,000 CTC, and then I apply at APSA. They would question me to say, but why is she earning 40? Where was she? Which companies did she work for? Because that is way below what an HR business partner would actually earn. So it's important for you, like to my earlier point, understand what the market is paying and the industry is paying, and moving jobs every 2 to 3 years helps you, to actually get that increase. Because in the past 3 years, especially with the pandemic, right, either people did not get increases, so organizations can save money, or they got 2%, or the inflationary increases and all of those things. So matured organizations will not frown upon that, especially if you have had 2 years or more, because then it's solid. And they can even call someone as your reference that can affirm that you work there and give you a good reference. Where it's problematic is when a person is leaving every 6 months, 12, like only 11 months here, 6 months there. Then it's like either you might be a problem child. But it's important. But it's important then when you are given an opportunity in an interview, then to explain your moves, right? And sometimes you might feel to say, what, the organization that I was in had actually different belief system or values than I had, and therefore I felt that I couldn't, work to my full potential, Sometimes it could have been a toxic environment. You can say that I found myself in an environment that was not conducive to my growth and to my wellness, and I'm actually now looking for an organization that I know they value wellness so much, and this is why I am here, So you also need to have some kind of valid reasons, especially when you are being asked that question in an interview. Does that help? Thanks.
Yes. Then we have one question here and the last one over there.
Sorry, mine wasn't a question.
Yeah,
I
she's
just
just
wanted to
adding.
quickly add that I was once told that if you do move too much and you become a bit like high end in the pay, that when they retrench, they might sometimes consider you first, because then they could get somebody to come do what you're doing at a much cheaper price. So do it, but do it right.
What
I
is your
guess.
take on that?
Yeah, but that's unfair, right? Because remember, according to Section 189 of the Labor Relations Act, you would be restructuring or retrenching for operational reasons, right? Whether you're not sustainable, it's economic, it's political, it's structural, right? You can't be retrenching someone because they're earning high. Yes, people can do it, right? But if you find out that that would be the reason, then that would actually be unfair. Of the salary band or at the top of the salary band, the disadvantage is that they can actually give you little increases as time goes on, so that they can rein you back into the band, because you become an abnormally when they actually do a comparison amongst your peers.
Okay. Over here.
Thank you so much for an insightful session. Now back to taking the organization on, or a toxic manager, right?
Sure.
I feel the system is never really designed to protect us employees. It's often designed to protect the organization.
Yeah.
In actual fact, we call you guys as HR high risk, not human resource. That's what we call you guys. And I'll tell you why I say this. You say keep a diary, right? And note the bystanders. When an opportunity arises that you have to take this person or the organization, and you need the bystanders that were there to say, "Gimoni mapalo," she was ill-treating you. Nobody wants to come forward,
True.
and understandably so. I mean, we've got families to feed, hey? So why would you put your job in jeopardy?
Definitely.
And there are times when you're taking on the blue-eyed baby of the organization. Nobody wants to support you. What then? Because in all honesty, I feel the system is designed to protect the organization over the employees. Thank you.
That's actually quite, it's true, one. Secondly, it's sad, because like I said, the one that alleges bears the honors of having to prove, right? So, and hence I said, sometimes you have to dig deep inside yourself to say, I'm fighting this on. And you know what the consequences thereof are going to be. And that's how it's designed. You need to bring proof that you have been unfairly treated. So if you don't have it, the other party, unfortunately, they are folding their arms waiting for you to prove. Because, you know, our law or, you know, our legislation doesn't say, you have been identified, you know, as a bully. Prove to us that you are not, right? Sure. So you actually have to. And unfortunately, it's designed like that. So you need to actually dig deep in yourself to say, do I want to fight this? At what cost, right? And what is that going to be? We're hoping that, you know, sometimes with a lot of people, you know, speaking out, you know, things will get to change, that legislation will get to change. Even, you know, the code of good practice that I spoke about, it's also a step in the right direction, right? If you look at what other countries are doing. So we're actually heading there, but our progress, unfortunately, it's very slow. But we have to actually bring these policies to life. So if we keep quiet, like because I know I'm going to lose my job and everything else, so we are not testing the law, we are not testing the legislation. And unfortunately, we have to put it to the test by actually, you know, taking that responsibility. So it's kind of like you're taking one for the team, you know? If I put it like that, it's unfortunate, but I think I strongly believe that we will actually get to, to that point. Okay.
All right, then we're going to take the last one. Oh, over here. Boniwe is still here. We're going to take a break after having Amanda speak to us. Then you can interact with either her or Kundi over here as well.
Okay. I feel like over the past couple of years, toxic workplaces have been a huge trend. For instance, you want to justify your move because the work environment was not conducive. How do you then prove to your potential new employer that the problem was the workplace and not actually you? Because at the end of the day, you're saying he who alleges must prove. Because
right?
let's say the toxicity is the attitudes that you're getting, the things that are said behind your back, the things that run way past you that should have gone through you. How do you prove that an environment was not conducive to you working and performing, and that you were not actually the problem?
Sure. You know, that's a very difficult one, but I often say to candidates that are going for an interview, be careful of having to subject yourself to the interviewer asking you about your employer and wanting to get the details, right? You are there because they have a vacancy, and they've invited you for an interview because you show that you might have the skills that's required. So the interview must be centered around that and not about your employer, because now it's like they're getting information or, secrets about the environment of that organization. So you need to actually structure your response very well. So you don't really have to tell them about what really happened, because you also don't want to show yourself as somebody that is very nagging, that is very negative, and you're going to bring, the negativity or the toxicity to the new place. Like I said, you can go as far as, I feel that, my value system with the organization that I was in or the team that I was in was not conducive. And as such, I'm looking for a working environment that's going to grow, my career, my skills, and also be able to, take care of, of my wellness. And that's as far as it goes, right? Anything else, I often say to recruiters and hiring managers, you're just trying to get, some spice out of this thing. It's unnecessary. So structure your answer very well. And you don't actually have you to use those words around toxicity. The environment wasn't conducive for my growth. And therefore, I've come across this particular position, looking at the job spec and looking at the company and the brand and what they have achieved, and the focus that they put forward in terms of their employee well-being. It's where I would actually want to grow my career. And that's a good enough answer. You are not there to be talking about how bad manager X was. It's not about that. So you need to structure your answer very well. And if you can see that there are trying to push, say, rein them in, and can say, you know what, I'm actually quite uncomfortable about having to discuss what actually happens in my employer space, as they would not be here to actually talk for themselves as well. And if they don't want to take it, then you just sit back and wait for them to move to the next question.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, one more. Ooh, okay, just one.
Millennials and Gen Zs jumping from one job to another, where they can get an older generation who is ready to work, who is ready to take the company to the next level, who has like gained a lot of experience. And then,
Yeah.
where do we find balance as employers?
Sure. So right now we live in an era where you actually find 4 generations in a workplace. Without a doubt, you find the Generation Z, the millennials, the baby boomers, and then the Generation X. So you'd find all 4 of those in one space, right? But the success of those 4 generations working well in one environment also depends on the culture, of the organization, and in terms of what they really value. Research actually shows that organizations that have diverse workforces in terms of, generations, they tend to do well in terms, of performance, profitability and all of those, because you have a diverse skill set, right? And we can actually coexist, because if you're a baby boomer and you have been in an organization for long, right? You hold the institutional knowledge, you know the processes, you understand, the systems, but maybe you might not have the know-how in terms of how, AI works, right? Or how things operating in a 4th industrial revolution. And it's an opportunity for you to actually learn from that millennial or that Gen Z in that space. And as much as the Gen Zs might be bringing, these tech-savvy skills, assertive skills, they don't have the expertise, they don't have that institutional knowledge. So if you actually look at it, one cannot do it without the other. And hence you will not succeed having a workforce that's only one-dimensional and say, I only want those that are committed. Chances are you're missing out in terms of what's happening in the market, in the industry. You can't be competitive, compared to your competitors in that space, because you don't know what's going out there. So it is important for organizations to actually have that diverse mix, but also invest, resources in terms of how do we manage knowledge exchange, right? How do we upskill each other? We can have peer-to-peer, mentors or coaches, or you can have your seniors actually mentoring your juniors in terms of, sharing knowledge, or, mentoring them in terms of, sharing that institutional knowledge and skills with them. And you actually have a junior also mentoring a senior in terms, of technology or other skills that they actually, bring on board. We have to get into a space where we coexist, because that's where the magic comes, right? Yeah. The great results come. It cannot be because you're having an organization just of millennials and thinking that you're gonna win. You're not. They don't have the know-how, right? And you need those people that have the know-how. So the leadership development, the management development becomes important, because the crux of it is how do managers manage those diverse workforces in their team. To your second question, millennials, because they are very outspoken, because remember, they were born in a very different era, right? So they have got the access to technology, all the information in the world to be able to actually counter or argue whatever that you are actually saying. And they actually know what is it that they want. And as an employer, if you're not going to be able to give that to you, they'll go and look for it elsewhere, right? And hence your offering or your value proposition has to be flexible to accommodate, different people. Just because someone who's 50 doesn't want to take on an opportunity in Ghana, it doesn't mean now you need to, to block this other one who's young because the older one didn't want to go. So you need to be flexible in having to give different, propositions to different, generations. And the Generation Zs, what they want to work for companies that are very open, or transparent, that can actually help them grow their careers, that actually live up to their values, that are also responding to some of the socio-economic challenges that we have in our country. And if you don't talk to these four things with the Gen Zs and the millennials, forget about it, right? But remember, the baby boomers, they're chasing retirement, right? These ones are chasing a career, they are chasing experience, they are chasing, building brands, which is something that the other is not understanding. So they're just not also dumping the company that has developed them. Sometimes they dump the behavior, sometimes they dump the unethical conduct, that they see with these companies. And I think that's where the challenge is, and that's where we need to find balance in terms of, how your human resources policies and how your line managers are actually coming together to make sure that they can create that coexistence.
All right.
Hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Boniwe.
Thank you, my
That
brother.
was brilliant.
Thank you.